Struggling to hit $20,000 a month, it may not be your skills, it just may be your marketing. Let me tell you how 10% of your business could influence the other 90%. Are you trying to make $20,000 a month? In some of our previous videos, we talked about how to do that. The problem that you may be running into is marketing. And so we're gonna break down many of the areas that you can track in marketing to help you achieve your goal of making $20,000 a month. So today I'm gonna break down some of the key areas that we track in our marketing department. Now to recap, I'm gonna go over some high level things that we're tracking on our P&L. The first thing is cost of goods sold. Now for us, that's material and labor. The second thing is overhead. We'll do another video on overhead, so check that out. Here are the 4 things that we track in our business. Now, these are 4 specific things that show up on the P&L. There's all types of other things that we also track, but at a high level, these are 4 of the most important things that we track. And as we track these things, it will also indicate other things that we need to check on based on the position of these 4 things. The first thing is cost of goods sold. We've made a video on that. You should check that out. Now this tracks all the material and the labor to get the job completed. The second thing is overhead. And so overhead, again, we have a video going over all that, but the overhead is going to be like your office and your staff internally. And we can talk more about that. The third thing is your net profit. Now that's your bottom line. That's how much money you make after all expenses. And we're gonna break that down in another video, exactly what that looks like. And the fourth thing, which we're gonna talk about today, is marketing. Marketing is part of the heartbeat of the business. There's a couple different key things that will make sure that your business is successful, and marketing is one of those key things. I would also say sales is probably the other thing. Those 2 things together are going to determine the success of your business. I would also like to put some percentages on each one of those. Now this is a spectrum, but I think it's helpful to kind of know where you should be. So our cost of goods sold is about 65%. I would love for that to be lower, but right now that's a good target to shoot for, and you can watch our other videos on how to bring some of that cost down. The other is marketing, and we're gonna go into great detail about that today, but that should be around 10% or lower. These are the high-end kind of spectrum that you wanna be at. Overhead. Now overhead is going to vary depending on the type of business that you have. If you need a storefront, if you have a heavy rent, that's obviously going to influence some of that. But most service-based businesses should have a really low overhead. It should be no more than 10%. Realistically, you should try to get it down below 5%. Net profit. So a minimum net profit you want to shoot for is 15%. You should be able to get that higher, but depending on the type of business that you have, and then in small businesses, we probably run some things through the business that don't necessarily have to go through the business, which draws your net profit down. And so you can always do the math and figure that out. But 15% is a good bottom line, and you also want to be aiming to increase that. Again, check out the video where we talk about that and how to increase your net profit. Like I said, these percentages can greatly fluctuate depending on the type of business and where you are in the cycle of your business. A lot of times people get hung up on the small details and never get started. So my hope for you is this gives you some targets to shoot for, but you get started. Go out and get your first job. It doesn't matter if the percentages aren't quite lining up, but get started and start learning how to juggle and how to get the business off the ground, because you're never going to make money if you don't catch some momentum. And so getting some momentum, the best thing you can do to get some momentum is get started. And so as you get started, you will begin to make progress. I'll give you an example. The first job I did in Colorado, I actually lost $500, and I bid the job. I was trying to find the market. I was trying to find where the pricing should be, and I priced it way too low. So if I would have taken that one job as an example of what business in Colorado was going to look like, I would have just shut down day one. But I knew that it was an experiment and I was just trying to figure things out. And so I quickly adjusted so that I could find the right price point and the right contractors to help me with the projects. And now we are very much successful. And now we have a great process that ensures that we have good margin on every job that we do. All right, so let's define marketing. A good definition that I heard from Alex Hormozy, which I love, it's the process of being known. It's something like that. And so you want people to know you exist, and then after they know you exist and know what you do, so you have clear messaging, then you go into the sales process. So marketing is just letting people know, hey, I paint homes, here I am, you can look at my company, here's why you should hire us, is probably a step farther, one step farther down the funnel than just getting known. And so there's a little bit of a dance you make depending on the type of marketing that you're doing. So sometimes you have just a 30 seconds or maybe 5 seconds to get a message across. And then other times, maybe it's a piece of print and you can put more information and links and telephone numbers and all that kind of stuff. But the most basic definition that I like, it is the process of being known. And so there's a couple things that we want to talk about in regards to marketing with that understanding. Now that we've defined marketing, here are a few things that we need to know. Who is my customer? Where is my customer? And what is the cheapest way for me to get in front of my customer? Not only are we thinking about those high level things, then we may refine it a little bit and say, what is my ideal customer? And so you're kind of building up an avatar of what that customer looks like, where they live, the type of money that they have, how much money they have, the service that you're offering, in the likelihood that they will need the service that you're offering. Knowing who your customer is also illuminates all the customers you don't need, so you're not wasting time and energy marketing to people who don't need your service. Knowing where your customer is allows you to pinpoint and market your customer more specifically and not waste a bunch of money marketing to people who don't need your service. Now, you do want to be careful with this, not to narrow the market too much because it's hard to catch momentum and we want to get some momentum going. So you do want to be careful to not narrow that area too much. Discovering the cheapest way to get in front of your ideal customer. Now, this is going to help you because obviously it's going to bring more money to the bottom line. But one thing to keep in mind is you want to experiment with a lot of different things. So if you find one thing that's working, definitely lean into that, get some revenue, and then try a couple other things. Every year we're trying something new on marketing because we want to always have our finger on the pulse of what's going on so that we can best get in front of our ideal customers. Who is your customer? What we want to do is create an avatar. So think about, sit down, write it out, draw it out, however you process best. But you want to create an avatar. Where does this person live? What do they do? What do they like? How are we going to get in front of them? And so all these things we are asking, we are setting up a blueprint for how I can get in front of that person and tell them about the service that we offer. Not from hey, we're always pushing it in your face, but we want to serve that customer in a very productive way. So we don't want to be obnoxious with our marketing, but we want to be very persistent. Maybe we want to be funny. Maybe we want to be serious. It depends on the service that you're offering. But in all of those scenarios, you need to know who they are, and you want to isolate that as much as you can. The more isolating you can be in your marketing, the more precision you can get in your marketing, the less money you have to spend to get in front of the right people. All right, so let's go through the process of what this could look like. So when I got to Colorado, I needed to get in front of the people that I wanted to paint for. So what did I do? So I talked to realtors, I talked to other painting contractors, I talked to people at the paint store, I talked to people who had their pulse on the residential housing market. And through those conversations, I was able to discover who or what I could use to get in front of my ideal customer. There are over 3 million people across the Front Range. So it's way too many people for me to personally go interact with, and it would require way too much money for me to get in front of every single person. So I had to have those conversations so I could spend the money on the right things so I could start building up some revenue. All right, so here's an example. In my hometown, there was this really nice, affluent area, super high-end homes right on the water, and they were the most beautiful homes, and it would be a great place for me to market my business because all of these homes need a lot of maintenance. But the problem is that these homes were all second and third homes, so it was very difficult to get in front of the owner so that I could market my service to them. And so if I did local marketing, I would be talking to renters and probably property management companies. Now, the renters, that's a total bust. You don't want to be talking to them. The property management companies, there is something there, and there's someone there that you can market to, and there are people that you could build relationships with. So that's not a bad angle. Now, I personally like working for the homeowner, but the problem with this is that those homeowners could be all over the United States, from Washington State to California to New York City, or maybe somewhere in the Midwest. And so it would be almost impossible for me to isolate where all those homeowners are and market to them in a productive way for their second or third home on the beach in Florida. And so a good way to market to them, maybe there's an owner's weekend where all the owners are in town. That would be a great time to market. That would be a great time to have some type of booth set up, or maybe be at a farmer's market or do mail outs that week. And so you really have to think through the best way to get in front of those customers. But you also want to think, what is going to be the easiest way? Again, back to momentum. What is going to be the easiest way for me to catch some momentum, to get my feet off the ground and really start building up some revenue? So if it's going to take a lot of time, a lot of effort, and that failure rate is probably going to be a little higher, that's probably where you don't want to start. You probably want to start with something that's going to be really easy, low friction, catch some momentum. Maybe you're not painting the luxury homes that you want, but you're working with somebody and you're able to start building up something. And then you have a little bit more of a nest egg over here that you can start experimenting with more difficult things later on down the road. All right, so there's some principle stuff that we've talked about, and I think that stuff is really important. You have to kind of mull over that and think about how you can apply that to your business and what that really looks like. But now let's get a little bit more tactical. I'm going to go over just some different companies that we've used and platforms that we recommend, and you'll have to dig into these a little bit more and figure out how to tweak them specifically for your business. But here we go. The first thing is lead generation. And so lead generation is going to basically be a source that you pay $1 and you get a lead back, or you pay $5 or $100, whatever the cost of the lead. So it's a very much one-for-one exchange. You pay a set amount and you get the lead back. Now, this is a great way to really catch some quick momentum. Highly recommend it. There's Yelp, there's Home Advisors, there's all these different platforms that you can use to get these leads. And if you talk to some people, they're gonna swear them off and say they're terrible, but this comes down to systems and how you're managing the leads, which is a different conversation, which we're gonna do a different video on. But lead generation is great. If you have the ability to sell and you have the ability to communicate with conviction to your customer, you actually can have a leg up with using these lead generation companies, because you may be better than the competition, because a lot of the good competition don't want to use these type of lead generation companies. So if you go in with your axe really sharpened and ready to go, you can generate a lot of business using traditional lead generation companies. Adam here. We don't ask for any money, but if you want to help us out and support our mission, please subscribe and share with a friend. Number 2, local presence. So this would be your Google profile, your Google listing on maps. So when people say, painters near me or mechanics near me, it pops up, it has a rating, you get reviews. This is super important. It'll link to your website. I would argue that this is the front line of your marketing in your business. So the very first thing that most people are going to do is they're going to Google you. And when they Google you, what are they going to see? Are they going to see good reviews? Are they going to see a good high star rating? Or are they going to see really bad reviews? You got 1 star and the customers are upset and you're not doing what you said. So you need to manage this with a lot of precision and a lot of care. You want to make sure that your Google profile and your local listings are up to date and working really well. They are the front line for your website. You can have $1 million website, but if you don't have a good local presence, it doesn't matter. And so people often will go to your Google profile, see your reviews, see some information, and maybe just call you and book something right there most of the time. But they might click and go to the third thing. The third thing is your website. Now, your website needs to be good. It needs to be professional. And if you're trying to do it on a budget, which I recommend, keep it simple. Don't try to make it super fancy and clunky and slow and it doesn't load. Don't overdo it and make it a poor experience, because a poor experience is going to be off-putting to the customer and they're just going to get frustrated and go to the next one. If I'm on a website and it won't load and you got these big images and all these different things happening, I am going to X and go to the next one. I do not want to be slowed down in the process of looking for things like this, looking for services. So I'm going to look at reviews. I'm going to go to their website, check it out. And on that website, it should be really informational. And again, there's a lot to get into on the website, but high level things, here's what I would have to say. If you have $10,000, maybe spend $1,000 or less on that website. Make it look good, make it look nice. If you have the ability, you could probably build it yourself. If you just have a little bit tech savviness, you could probably build your own website, but it is important to make sure the graphics are good. You don't need to spend a ton of money getting a logo made, but have a nice logo. Have a nice clean interface. Make sure your spelling's right. Make sure your grammar's right. Make sure it's professional. Make sure it looks like somebody, like you're trying to attract the kind of customer that you want. So if you want a customer doesn't care about the details, well, they're probably not going to care about their home, and they're probably not going to want to pay you money to fix up their home. So you want someone who is meticulous and cares about their home, cares about their lawn, and then in return is going to care how you present yourself. So your website is in a lot of ways a business card that allows the customer to know the type of person and the type of business that you have. All right, so number 4 is print marketing. There's a lot of different ways you can do print marketing, and there's some really terrible print marketing, and then there's some decent print marketing, and then there's some really good print marketing. The good is difficult to find, but there are some good ones out there. And so we don't do a lot of branding. Really, we do no branding. We do about $3 million in revenue a year, and we don't really need the branding. Now, we're starting to do a little bit more of that, but what I like in marketing is direct response. It's a 1-for-1 exchange. I give you something and you give me something back. Now, it's actually not a dollar for a dollar exchange. In a lot of cases, it's a $1 for $10 exchange. So I pay $1, I get $10 back, and that's a much better deal. I'll do that all day long. So if I find marketing that works, I'm going to put lots of money into it. I'm going to keep going because it's not really cost, it's an investment. And so that's why refining it is really important. But going to the print marketing, you want to find companies that target the homeowners that you want, like we've talked about, the neighborhoods. You want to make sure they're not renters. You want to make sure that they're actually people that are interested in the service that you're offering. A couple things that I have found that have worked well in our company is try to avoid the really glossy sales material. The things that look like you're being sold, customers tend to not like that. The most successful things that I've had are things that look more official. They're pretty plain. They don't have graphics of homes on them. It just says like, here are top rated companies in your area, or here are 2 painting companies in your area. And I've actually had better luck with print marketing that shows multiple, say in my case, painting businesses or roofing companies. And the reason I think that those work better is I am very confident in my ability to outshine my competition. And so if they call me and then they call this other company, I am confident in my ability to look more professional, present better, give a competitive price, not always the cheapest, but a competitive price, and convey the value of my company versus the competition's ability to convey the value that they are offering. When I am paired up against someone else, I feel like I shine well. When I am by myself, well, there's no comparison. And so the scale is a little harder to gauge on. So it's like, well, are they really good, or are they average, or are they below average? Everything's getting compared just on this one postcard by itself, if that makes sense. So anytime you can be next to someone else, it's competition in a way, but is it really? Because if you're much better than everyone else around you, it's not really competition. It's just kind of cluttering up the field, and you're able to be a bright light that says, oh, they are much better, and it's not even a question. So I would consider that when you're looking at print marketing. If you're doing independent print marketing and you're just sending out a postcard, it's hard to get economies of scale with that sometimes. You're also getting more into branding, and you're not playing off the credibility of the other publication that's being sent. With that said, if you go with a publication that has a bad reputation, it can actually have a negative effect. So you really want to thread that needle carefully and be thoughtful in how you're doing it. All right, so let's talk about some other things that personally I don't have as much experience with, but I know they work. I've talked to a lot of companies, and there are some great options. So some things that I have done that we don't do anymore: home shows. That's a great thing. If you have time and not money, a home show is great because you can get in front of a lot of people, typically for a couple $100, $1,000, and those work pretty well. I feel like they are dying, but it's still a good way to get in front of customers, especially on a budget, but you gotta be willing to dedicate your time or donate your time to that cause. Door knocking. I've never done door knocking. I hate the idea of it, and I don't want anything to do with it. Not to say that we may do it in the future, God willing, hopefully not. But I know a lot of companies that generate hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars from just door knocking. And so it's a process. You need to do it tastefully. Again, there's a lot of people that do it. So when you do it better, it makes it easy to shine a little bit. And so I would just say, be thoughtful in how you do these things. Door knocking, farmers markets, home shows, all different types of way to get up foot traffic, which will help your business when you're on a budget. Here are a couple things to consider when you're talking to other companies and you're trying to find the best marketing avenue. A lot of people I've talked to have been very negative about things that have worked really well for our company. And so you really need to be thoughtful in consider who you're talking to and what is their ability. I've talked to people who are struggling to manage a $1 million business, and they have multiple layers of infrastructure, and they're not really profitable because they have project managers and salespeople and marketing and a secretary and all this stuff. And I don't have any of that, and we're super profitable and we're super efficient and we have a great systems. Our customers love our process. And so I look at that and I'm like, well, I may take your advice on this one little thing, but I'm definitely not going to take your advice on this. Or you may talk to someone who says, oh, home shows are terrible. Or you may even listen to me and be like, door knocking, and I don't do door knocking, but I've never done door knocking. And I also know that a lot of people are successful with it. So it's just a matter of what you want to spend your time in, what you have the ability to do. So if you don't have cash, you have time. And so use your time to go knock on doors. If you have cash and you don't have a lot of time, then invest in buying leads. So get advice. Talk to people. It's definitely worth getting information, but don't take the information as the final say. Get all the information, be thoughtful, be critical, be an open-minded thinker on these topics and figure out what's going to work. And where people are not spending time is where there's an opportunity. But at the same time, don't try to reinvent the wheel and come up with a special app and this special software and this and that. You're just going to spend a bunch of money and you're probably not going to make a lot of it back. So get the momentum so you can get your project going. We're going to touch on systems. We're going to do a whole nother video on systems, but systems are important, specifically around marketing. We have really good, robust systems. Now, you don't have to do things the exact same way that we do them because you might be in a different part of the process. But regardless, if you're writing things down on pen and paper, or you have a spreadsheet, or you have a good CRM, a good system, and start working and thinking through what that should look like. Because what our systems look like today is a lot different than what they looked like 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago. So as an example, our close rate increased about 10% over the past couple years because of the systems and the processes we put in place. So I was in the process of trying to figure out, do we want to hire someone or do we need to improve our systems, and looking at all these things. And sometimes I like to mull over these and look at all the angles, because the knee-jerk reaction is hire someone, we should do this. But what I was able to do is we didn't hire someone, we refined our systems to make them even more efficient, and then we hired someone that was going to be less costly to our company, but more efficient for our system. And it's just been a great win-win for everyone involved. We have a great team member that we brought on board, and we have great systems and processes in place to be able to follow up with these leads. What does this look like? So if you fill out a form or give us a call, we have a streamlined process from the first call to getting scheduled for me showing up to your home. We have processes in place for reminding that customer that I'm coming to their home. And then we have a process for following up on the sales process after I've been to their home. So we're have a nice funnel for getting the call, getting the schedule. We have a good process for reminding them so that they show up and they remember that we're coming. And then we have a good process for making the sale afterwards. But then fourthly, we also have a good process for fulfilling the project. And that's also crucial because that's going to lead back into your Google profile and getting really good reviews. So all of these systems work together and they complement one another. And you can't run a business just with one good process. There's 4 or 5 funnels in your business that you're constantly running customers and potential vendors through. And so it's really important that you think through the process in the business. And as you're starting, you don't have to have all those processes in place, but you at least want to be innovating in refining those processes. So every time you notice a problem, it's like, oh, that shouldn't happen. Let's fix that. And you're slowly refining the process to make the experience the best it can be. Here are 4 pillars that we really view everything through in our company, specifically on the marketing side. And this is courtesy of Alex Hormozy. You have the dream outcome, the likelihood of achieving the dream outcome, the sacrifice required to achieve the dream outcome. Number 4, the time required to achieve the dream outcome. And if you apply those 4 kind of steps or pillars to any business that's successful, I think you'll see the commonality through those businesses. And so it's really important. And so I'll break that down real quick. How does that look in my business? The dream outcome. We paint homes. How do people know that we paint homes? They can see it on our website. They see our Google profile. They see that we offer a beautiful finished product. What is the believability? The likelihood that we will be able to deliver that dream outcome. Well, they see the hundreds of reviews that we have on our Google profile. They can look at the pictures in our gallery. And then there's also just the salesmanship and the interaction that they have with me or our crews. And they feel comfortable and confident. They see it, they interact, and we're all believable. So it all ties into dream outcome outcome and the likelihood of being able to achieve that dream outcome. Then the third thing is the sacrifice required. And so that goes back to systems. How can we make it easy for the customer to schedule? How can we make it easy for the customer to remember? How can we make it easy for them to say yes? What are the offerings that we can make? What are the things that we're giving them that other people aren't? Are we giving a payment plan? Are we giving a color consultation? Are we giving free imaging of their home? Are we giving, wood replacement? What are we helping them overcome so that they have to do less? The idea is we want to make it super easy for them to say yes. And then the process, once they say yes, all these things, we want to minimize the effort that the customer has to put in to saying yes. And now the time required. And this goes back to the sacrifice needed. So there's little sacrifice and there's little time. You're not gonna have to sacrifice your time. We don't need you to walk around with us, every hour when we're on the job. We don't need you to really do anything. We want to minimize the involvement that we need from the customer. Think of Amazon. You click one button and sometimes the same day the thing shows up at your front door or 2 days later. It's annoying when you have a package and it doesn't come to your front door and then you got to go pick it up at the post office or you got to go to FedEx. You have to go somewhere to pick it up. It's more time, it's more sacrifice, and you want to minimize that sacrifice in time that's required. This isn't theory. This is what I do every day. If a dyslexic like myself can do this, so can you.